Hi, Jim here, just dropping in before this week's episode to tell you about my latest movie, The Apocalypse Box. It's a horror film and I'd love for you to check it out. If you go to apocalypsebox.co.uk, you can find all the links on where you can watch the movie. Right, let's get on with this week's episode. Hi, Jim here, and you're listening to the Honest Filmmaker podcast, career advice from people in the business. This week I'm speaking to cinematographer and director Hakim Zziwa. Hakim's from Uganda and originally started out as a dancer and then went on to make corporate films after a scholarship in America. He's also made a bunch of short films that have done really well on the festival circuit and have a really high-end quality about them. I talked to Hakim about how he achieved that high-end look in his short films. He gave me some tips on working on a low budget. We also talked about documentary filmmaking and how his film festival run on those short films really helped him and what he got out of it. Enjoy. Talk me through how you got into filmmaking.
So how I got into filmmaking is an interesting journey. Honestly speaking, the background of that all is performing arts, dance performing arts, storytelling through dance theater. That was the foundation. From that storytelling, it was like, oh, probably maybe could get into making some dance videos, concept-based dance videos. And from there, it's so funny that at some point I did a dance video, and I got somebody's attention who was then my boss at that point, who got me into the professional side of video because he saw potential in my ability to do some cool stuff with video. Yeah, so performing arts as a dancer, I was a dancer for over a decade as a profession, so that's where it all started. Yeah.
Fab. And was that in Uganda you were dancing?
Yes, that was in Uganda, and I was able to meet a few filmmakers that had come to Uganda to film a documentary. One of them actually is Nabil. He's a director, music video director. Nabil, who was directing at that time a film called Bouncing Cats in Uganda, sponsored by Red Bull. So when I saw that, it just pushed me even more. I was like, oh, I want to be like this guy, So in Uganda at that time, um, dance, being in the art space, the world of hip hop culture and stuff, yeah, pushed me more towards more like a plan B besides performing arts. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. And so in between that, how have you now ended up in America?
Yeah, that's another interesting journey. So first and foremost, I did have some family members in America, United States. And opportunity came up, and I was like, sure, I would take it. Um, I was lucky to be amongst those few people that were able to come to the United States to uh, bump up my filmmaking. I got a small little scholarship for an intensive film program at that time with a school that was with a faculty at that time that was under Boston University. They were offering this amazing program, digital filmmaking certificate, 9 months intensive, where they just pack you with all this information. I mean, coming from Uganda, at that time, there wasn't like really fully fledged film schools there. As we speak, there's like one, that is recognizable, but at that time we didn't have it. So my brother was able to help me with the whole paperwork. You could come through here and all that stuff. And when I was done with that certificate, the rest was history. I was able to, start working um, in Boston with high institutions of learning. Harvard was one of the institutions I started working with at that time, but of course, it was mostly um, higher education type of videos, talking heads, and all that stuff. But at the same time, I was trying to got my first short film done, probably around 2016, I would say, because I was done with the program in. I enrolled in 2015, and I was done by summer 2016. So, and I did my first short film later that year, which was not the best, but it was something to learn from.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's how I ended up in the United States up to now. But I still go back home because I feel like home there are richer stories home to
Mm.
these short films where there's so many stories that aren't told in Africa, and I feel like we don't have to be waiting for a big studio to come and tell our stories. So that's why I keep going back and forth. Apart from the pandemic time when it didn't work out.
Yeah. And I can tell, looking at your short films, how kind of exciting a backdrop it is as well, Uganda, compared to, I imagine those short films really kind of stand out because of that backdrop. Um, and one of the things I was going to say about your short movies is they look like they've had money spent on them. Like they look high quality, high end. Have they had money spent on them? And the second part of that, which every filmmaker's going to want to know, is how did you manage to fund those films?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, some money has been spent on those short films, um, and that's all money coming from out of pocket. Because I was looking, once I was done with the school, with this program, I would say, and I looked at the industry. I'm like, okay, am I going to sit there and wait for somebody to give me money, you know, or am I gonna tap from my day job? At that time, I had like a day video job, like that, more like because in-house video job. So through in-house video job and also through the years, I've been able to raise money from my small little. I have a small little business, video business, video strategy, marketing videos, kind of stuff, producing that type of videos. So that, and also a bit for my job through the years that has helped me fund these films. Because thinking about the fact that the process, because I was looking at the money that was being given out to short films, and it wasn't that much money. It was something I could save for, right?
Mm.
And I would save myself from all this huge paperwork of accountability. How do you spend on all that kind of stuff? I was like, you know what, it's possible, and it's cheaper to produce down in Uganda, at least as well. It's more expensive now, but the more the years go, the more expensive it gets because people are more aware now how to
Mm.
produce films and stuff. But the gear got cheaper, and it was just a matter of me just sitting down and thinking, how can I save on spending on a film, including being aware of how gear works, because gear plays a big role in saving you on making short films. If you understand that, okay, if I have a run-in, if I have this amount of lenses, I guess in point would be like, I'm gonna be sticking. I invested in zoom lenses, like 3 zoom lenses, knowing that, okay, if I want to shoot this thing in a few days, I need to be shooting it on zooms because it's going to save me some time. It's going to go chop chop quick quick, as opposed to primes are really really good. With prime lenses, you're going to get amazing image quality and all that stuff. But again, it goes back to the story itself. To me, at some point, I started moving away from gear more to story. So having a gear background, very tech savvy about gear, how gear works, helped me save some money because anything to do with rentals, the most that I ever rented out on a project was probably a car mount. Put it like it's kind of like a complex thing, that I didn't want to risk. But the rest of the stuff, just putting these small little cameras, the Sony A7S or sometimes Lumix cameras, just packing them in a bag and traveling with them. It's easy to put them together. So that has helped me save on spending. And I also having had experience working with some people in the United States, um, a mentor of mine and a few other friends that have had me on their sets, and I've seen how they use the expensive stuff, and I'm like, I can achieve that if I do this. So that has helped me save a bit.
So you've self-funded, and
Mhm.
I guess my question was around what would be your advice to get that high-end look, that high-quality look in your short films?
Being aware about, or rather educating ourselves about post production. I started off as an editor, by the way. Before I started shooting, I started off as an editor for probably like 7 good years of editing. So I mastered that space first. And before I left Uganda, my boss at that time told me, you will get more jobs if you are shooting as well. As an editor, you're not going to get more jobs, but if you, and that was before the program, right? So I enrolled in the program, and I learned more about cameras, how to shoot, how to tell stories using these tools. But then the editing part is a space where somebody needs to invest some time, because there's a lot of free education about this stuff. Some you have to buy some courses, but there's quite a bunch on YouTube. I keep telling a lot of people YouTube, and also depending on the keywords you use, because it's a sea, it's a monster of information. But certain keywords, if you're particular in the certain keywords that you use to search whatever you want to learn, there's always the information on YouTube. So mastering post production is a good resource, so you understand more of how, because I dealt with so many people's projects that were messed up, and at some point I was a fixer. I'm going to fix this. So now I was like, I need to learn how to shoot too, so I could edit my own stuff. So with that, that has, I think at that time, prepped me for the quality of the films that I'm producing now. And also continuous researching and learning about the whole ecosystem. Because in Africa, we've been desperate for information for a while, since we don't have schools. So you find yourself learning every stage of production. You have an idea of what's happening, as opposed to probably in other some parts of the world where people specialize more, like I'm assistant camera, I'm just going to be pulling focus, that's it. But for us, the fact that even as we speak up to now, you find somebody, he was probably your sound guy on a previous film, and this time around he's what, producer. People are like multitasking all this stuff. It's the kind of stuff that I also found in LA at some point last year, and I was surprised that, oh, people in LA too go this hard. Probably sometimes goes back to the fact that people need to get jobs. Like if you tie yourself to just being in this specific role, you're going to be limited. But that background of trying to know every stage of production contributes to what I'm producing now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always good to have that knowledge, even if
Mhm.
you're not doing those jobs, of how those other jobs fit together and how to get the best out of them all. So, the other side to that, or the thing I worry about, if I was doing camera and directing, for example, which I know you do yourself, how do you make sure that cameraman Hakim isn't uh, affecting what director Hakim has got to get in the can? How do you make sure the performance and the shots are good without just drowning in jobs?
That's a great question. Actually, I went through that in the past few years, and the pandemic was like the break that had me rethink on how to go about this stuff. The first two short films that I produced, one was a doc, because I'm passionate about documentary too, since I have this whole corporate video background, interviews, talking head and stuff. So the first two films that I did were good for me to sit back and see what I need to change. So the whole thought process happened between the pandemic and after. So before the first two short films that I produced, I was hands on the camera, giving less attention to the actors and stuff. And I saw the mistakes that I did. And the pandemic was to a certain degree a blessing, because I sat back, rethought, um, um, had to replan again, understand story structure even more. So after that, strategy kind of changed. The past two short films that I've done, one of which is in post, I've been hiring camera operators, two of them. But what I do before we shoot, we have like 3 days of prep or 4 days of prep. Let me say if I fly, because I usually have like up to a month or month and a half to shoot this film. So flying in, fast 5 or a week is prep, rehearsals, camera department, you know, um, uh, production design, all that stuff. So the camera department, the guys that have been looking up to me for some time, so they've believed and trusted what decisions that I make. So after the pandemic, the strategy kind of changed. Of course, for a few, there's always that thing you're fighting in you not to touch the camera. But usually the fact that you're on a budget, time is running out. He's not pulling off the shot, and I know the shot myself. I'm like, hey, could I get those last two shots? And I get them myself, and we move on. Bam, bam, bam. But the first 3 or 4 days are very important. Me as a director in the camera department and the assistant camera, we we break down every scene, what shots we're going to take. Once we get all the basics, then we can focus on the maybe, how about this, how about that, because we're on a budget, so there's no time. It's my own money I'm spending, and I'm aware I'm producing, directing the actors and also the photography as well. So I keep the role of directing and photography as well, where I just put them in my world so they understand why I want this particular movement and what it adds to the story. Why? Because um, a number of camera operators were very comfortable. There's some rules around putting a camera on a tripod, right? There's certain rules around that. Never move the camera and all that stuff. But in my head, I'm like, okay, if people are fighting, like, why would we keep it on a tripod? You know? So a lot of them have been playing safe. There's a lot of playing safe in spaces where people are not aware about what, especially if the few workshops that they got strictly don't move the camera, all the kind of stuff. So I was able to open up their minds. I'm like, no, because I'm like, okay, I'm funding it. So yeah, this is how I feel,
Yeah.
So they open up. They're really glad that they've learned some things from me, and I've learned some stuff from them, because people that have been shooting, because in Africa, well, specifically East Africa, Uganda, there's this, I'll say the equivalent of probably Telemundo soap series stuff on people's TV shows that usually have like 200 episodes and stuff. So there's a lot of that in Uganda, and a lot of these guys have been shooting that stuff where it's like put on the tripod and all that kind of stuff. But they're friends from way back. They're people who I've started relationships with pre-pandemic. Seeing a dude, they tell you, here's a camera, and then you talk to them, you have it, have lunch, you have, talk to them. So been building those relationships to get to these sections where I can trust them and be like, this is what I want, this is what we're going for. They've learned stuff from me, I've learned stuff from them, because they're shooting almost every day.
Yeah. And talking about, so that's the short film side, documentaries. What's your tips for that? How do you get the most out of that? Because I find I've done stuff in the corporate space before, and in a way, you have to sort of disappear a bit as a camera person because you don't want to get in the way and you don't want to affect what you're filming. You don't want to change anything. So, what are your tips for that? How do you do a good documentary?
I would say, because I've only done one, which actually did well. But I would say from experience at that documentary that I've done, I've always made sure that, because there's a lot of interviews. So with these interviews, it's the same setup as any other marketing promotional docu-style video. So there's been this understanding that whoever is telling the story, you have to let them say all that they have to say. Well, I would say not worrying so much about memory or memory cards, all that kind of stuff. Whereby if you limit them, then you're gonna miss out on certain parts of the story. And I saw that in post production. I'm like, wow, if I had told them, if I had restricted them, then I wouldn't have gotten to know this part. So I won't speak so much in that space because it's a space that I'm still trying to develop, because it's narrative and the documentary. Those are two huge monsters. So I've been doing a lot of narrative, but then recently I've been looking at a few professionals and how they do, and some of them have courses online. I'm looking forward to taking those courses so I can learn and understand documentary better, because I still also have to figure out the storytelling structure of I mean, there's quite a number of them, but it's a space that I'm still developing as we speak.
Yeah. And then talking to your short films, so they look super high quality. You've got a country you can go back to and get some awesome locations, some real dramatic stuff. Why no feature film? When's that coming?
So a feature film, I think, is the next thing that I'm going to do. Having done what probably one, two, three. Having done like 5 short films, I feel like I'm ready now. And why did it take me this long? And people have been asking me this question actually. Uh, I've been practicing. I like to, if I get to a feature, I'd like to be 100% comfortable because like the recent one that I just did, which is in post, I was like the most comfortable person ever in my career ever. So it's been practice grounds to understand how the whole narrative monster works. I call it a monster because there's so many pieces around narrative. How do festivals work? How does distribution work? How does audio post production work? Because that's another huge element that is neglected by a lot of people. Audio post, because audio post, past 2 short films that I've done are the first short films that are done with a bigger crew, and films that are done where the audio post production is separate. Even if I'm an editor, I know how to, plugins and all that stuff. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do this myself. I need to learn how this stuff works on a professional level. There's this one company in my country that does audio post on an international level, Netflix level, HBO, and all that stuff. I know some people that work there. It's been pretty expensive, but I feel like it's has been a good investment for me to understand how those spaces work. Because I got to realize like um, industry executives, as they call them, or people who are dealing in that space, usually you want them to find you ready, right?
Mm.
They're asking something and like, what's that, so these 2 short films, I'm using them as learning spaces. What's a film media tour? I didn't know what that was, right? When a film comes out, marketing a film too, you know how do you market this film using social media? All that's prep. It's investment for myself in the long run without expecting to get money from these short films, especially the past 2 short films, which I've invested quite a bit, where I'm like, okay, I'm not expecting any money back, but this is building an audience, marketing myself, understanding how the whole thing works. That was the most important thing. And what I knew before and what I know now is way more and even more comfortable to kind of, if I'm, those short films too could help me secure some funding too as well. Because um, if the pitch goes well and it comes along with what you've done before, right? I've been told that that's something that's a huge plus. It's deep waters, but I feel like in the long run, the feature is the next thing. I'm writing one, and I'm in touch with some of my mentors that would help me shape it, because writing is another monster that I've been I've been struggling with, storytelling, story structure, emotional, camera movement, all that stuff. Like how does a story, and there's all that language in scripting that is deep, the literature in film, all that stuff that I'm continuously learning. I won't say teaching myself because I don't have that knowledge, but if I come across a course that's teaching this, there's so many resources on YouTube, Film Courage. I mean, Honest Filmmaker too. I'm always listening to all these things, people with experience, listening to what they're saying. Why did they take those decisions? So learning is a huge thing, and feature film is coming soon, where I feel like I'm in that space. I'm at this stage where I feel like I'm comfortable attacking a feature film, as opposed to, because I already have like 2 people willing to invest in a feature film, on my next feature film. So I want them to feel comfortable, because sometimes, because with feature films, it's usually money on the line, right? And if I do a short film, I don't want to be doing like extremely low budget type of short film, right? I would like it to have a bit of a good budget, depending on who you're talking to, what a good budget is. That's another topic for another day. But I'd like to be in that space where, yes, money is on the line, but what you're going to get is going to be good.
Well, I look forward to seeing that feature film when you get to it. And the other thing is, it's not just money, it's time, isn't it? Because that feature film's going to take a couple of years of your life away. So you've got to make sure you're going into that knowing exactly what you want to make.
Yeah.
Talking about learning experiences, so you've done pretty well festival wise with all of your short films. What have you learned from that festival process? How do you get the most out of it? Any tips for getting into festivals?
So film festivals, I would say, for the most part, it's been exposure, because I mean, there's so many filmmakers around the world now, but it's good exposure, and also it helps you understand the fact that at film festivals, the chances are high you're going to run into a producer or a representative from a studio, or and it's a space that I've also learned that you would have to spend, and that's something I think some people probably are not, but it's when it comes to budgeting for film, you have to spend on festivals. But meeting people, networking is huge on festivals. You don't know who you're going to meet. There's no guarantee that at that festival you're going to get a deal, right? And also learning that at a festival you want to be ready with what your next project is, because they're going to say, oh, we like your film, we like, so what are you working on next? If you don't have a next, at least if you have like a treatment or something, throw it at them, in case you get an email, that is, because you want to be ready with film festivals. But it's good exposure, and it also lets you learn more about the do's and don'ts in film, especially with film music scoring and stuff. How far certain licenses go. There's stock music, of course. I mean, there's tons of companies that you could put all that music in, but the license has limits. Where like if you go into some of them specify if you go into festivals, we need to negotiate. Strictly YouTube and stuff. So the way music works in film has helped me understand. The festivals, the way submitting festivals has helped me understand more how licenses work when it comes to music or certain elements in your film. Yeah, so far.
And I'd add to that and say that the other good thing about a festival is you get to watch your film in front of an audience, don't you? And get that feedback from them as to what works, what doesn't work, and you kind of learn from that audience. And they're usually quite a friendly audience. They're there to enjoy the films. So at least you finally get to see it on the big screen and see people enjoy it. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you'd like to hear from more industry professionals, how they got into the business and how you can do the same, or you just want to listen to some cool stories from movie sets around the world, then please do subscribe to the Honest Filmmaker podcast.